thank you for joining us. You're all very, very welcome. It's lovely to be here this evening as part of the Causeway Coast and Glens Northern Lights sessions, and to be here with Bernie McGill and Hannah McPhillimy. Thank you very much to the Council for inviting the three of us to be part of this event. I am Jessica Bates. I work in the Coleraine campus of Ulster University in the School of Education, where my work centres around libraries and schools and education. 12 years ago, I moved to Rathlin Island with my husband Stephen, and we've never looked back. Bernie McGill is the author of 2 novels, The Watch House, nominated for the Ireland European Union Prize for Literature in 2019 and set on Rathlin Island, and The Butterfly Cabinet, which is set in Portstewart. Her collection of short stories, Sleepwalkers, was nominated for the Edgehill Prize in 2014. Her work has been published in the UK, the US, and in translation in Italy and the Netherlands. Her short fiction has appeared in anthologies, Belfast Stories, The Long Gaze Back, The Glass Shore, and Female Lines. She was Writing Fellow with the Royal Literary Fund in Queen's University Belfast from 2018 to 2020. And Bernie and I are joined by musician Hannah McPhillimy, originally from Coleraine and now based in Belfast. And I'm delighted to have become acquainted with Hannah's music. She has 4 EPs, the most recent being Wind Machine and Seeing Things. During lockdown, she created a number of recordings, all available on YouTube as part of her project called Suitcase Songs, which is a really beautiful project. Described by the Irish Times as a bit of a wonder, she has supported acts such as Foy Vance, Soak, and the Gloaming. Hannah has recently returned from completing her Masters in Classical Composition at Michigan University and touring the US. So it's really wonderful this evening to be celebrating the work of these 2 powerful North Coast women. Over the course of the next hour, I'll be asking Bernie about her writing, about how important the North Coast is to her work, and we'll hear readings from her novel, The Watch House, set on Rathlin, and we'll hear songs from Hannah and about how the landscape has influenced her music. One of the key themes that will run throughout this get-together is that of connectivity, connections to places and people and words that take us from the 19th century to the present. And it's more important than ever at the moment to celebrate such connections when our daily lives are so affected by social distancing and not getting to see people as much as we might like. So thank you to everyone for joining us for the session and listening in. We're going to start with some music from Hannah. So handing over to Hannah to play her song, Watchman. Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you, Jessica, for that introduction, and to Bernie for inviting me along to your Zoom call. I'm glad that you admitted me into the room. And also I want to say, just before we begin, a big thank you to our virtual hosts, Flowerfield Arts and Roe Valley Arts Centre, and to my physical hosts. I'm here in a beautiful building in Belfast that belongs to Redeemer Central Church. So it's lovely to play here. It's also lovely to be at an event at all and play to some real people, I hope. So I'm going to do that now and play a song for you. The song that I've chosen to sing is called Watchman, not to be confused with Bernie's novel, which is, of course, The Watch House. And I chose it not only because they sound similar, but also because it explores similar themes, like Jessica was saying, about isolation and disconnection. And probably as well that kind of innate desire we all have just to be in the physical presence of someone who gets us and understands us, and how we know that a lot of the time that's the thing we're really missing and the thing that can make life seem manageable. So this is Watchman. Haven't seen the day in 30 nights. Spend them watching others come to life. Far away, a million lights. They're nowhere near me. Haven't seen one day this whole like a night, but I'm a million different people I don't know alike. And far away, a warm invite to nowhere near me. And I can't erase these eyes tonight. My heart's not in keeping men alive. Make me wise like a newborn child. I'll sleep so easy with someone near. My city I've counted 1 million heads, but I can't take my eye from one of them. Far away, your cry rings dead. I'm nowhere near it. Ooh, I know the Lord above has lasers for eyes, and hands so big he fits the world inside. And far away, he flew 1 million miles just to be nearer. Sleep so easy with someone near. I'll sleep so easy with someone near. I'll sleep so easy with someone near me. And oh, 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 oh.
Thank you, Hannah. That was really beautiful. So, Bernie, it's great to see you today.
And you? I'm really good, yeah. It's great to see Rathlin, albeit in map form, even though I can't actually be there. But yeah, things are good, yeah. How are things in the island?
Very good indeed. It's a little bit quieter now. Obviously, we've come to the end of the summer. We did have some visitors over the summer. It was hard initially during the lockdown because people were separated maybe from loved ones on the other side, but it brought the community all together, and that was lovely. And it gave us a chance to really appreciate the island during springtime without lots of people. So that was quite nice as well. But it was tough, but it was good, and we all pulled together, and we're doing really well. So I know for you, I mean, this is different times as well. What have the last few months been like for you?
Well, like everyone else, they've been strange. We've been very quiet, initially very quiet. March and April and May. July and August were very busy with us. I'm in Portstewart, so yeah, that was a bit crazy, but things have quietened down again now. So things aren't so very different from me. I spend a lot of time in this room anyway, looking at the screen. So it's just that more recently people have been speaking back to me from the screen, which hasn't really been happening before. But yeah, we're all well, thankfully. So that's good.
really good to hear. And one of the last times that you and I actually met in person was on Rathlin Island. You were over facilitating the Ballycastle Writers Group, and that feels like quite a long time ago now.
It does. That was over a year ago.
Yeah.
September last year. Yeah, it seems like a century ago now to be able to do something like that, to travel to the island and to spend time in a room with people writing. I really miss it, I must admit.
Yeah.
The online communication is great, but there is no real substitute for being in a room with people and, you know, communicating with them eyeball to eyeball.
I know. Well, hopefully we'll get to share another glass of wine and talk about writing again soon. And I know Rathlin is a really special place to you. Take us back to your first visit here. What do you remember about your very first visit to the island?
Oh, the island put on all its bling the first time that I was there. The sun shone for the full weekend. I was with the Ballycastle Writers Group, and they used to hold a writing festival in Rathlin, as you know. And it was a fantastic weekend. We would go for the weekend. There was music, lots of writing, lots of workshops, some brilliant writers and facilitators. And we just spent the whole weekend immersed totally in writing. And it was a beautiful weekend. The first time I went, it was like the Mediterranean. We couldn't believe it. And we just had a great time. So I have very fond memories. And you can't go to Rathlin really without hearing about the Marconi connection. So that was, I knew about it before, but I got really interested in it after that. And the idea that these engineers arrived over 100 years ago, 120 years ago, on an island that was fairly remote at the time, that would have been cut off fairly regularly from the mainland, and sometimes still is, as you know. And that they were engaged in this extraordinary technology, communicating wirelessly with the mainland, which hadn't ever been possible before. So that really caught my imagination, that idea and I did come across this idea when I was reading about the island, you know, the idea that they were, you know, these people were to be someone to be wary of, maybe, or suspicious of, and that whatever it was they were engaged in was potentially dangerous, or, you know, in some way detrimental to the islanders, and that there was something, you know, akin to magic that was going on with those, you know, with all that equipment and what they were up to. So I mean, that's just a gift for a writer, you know, a story like that. So yeah, that was where the idea came from initially.
And when did you know you were going to write this book, and what shape it was going to take?
Well, I wrote another book before that. So the Butterfly Cabinet came first, and then a short story collection. But I suppose the idea was always there, and the question in my head was, what impact would that have had on the islanders? How would they have felt towards these strangers who arrived? What would they have known about what they were doing? What would they have understood about that? So that the question was always there. And then, I don't know, I suppose there's just a time when you feel, yeah, I think I can tackle this now. I'm ready to tackle this idea.
I mean, that mystery and that sense of suspicion really does come across, you know, in the watch house, but what could possibly be happening, and how, you know, it was a dramatic change to the day-to-day lives that the islanders would have had at that time. And I know you're going to read a little bit for us now from the watch house. So I'm looking forward to hearing that. And then we're going to hear from Hannah just after that. So do you want to read us a bit from the watch house?
I will.
Thank you.
So this piece that I'm about to read comes quite early in the book, and the speaker is Nuala. She's the islander from whose eyes most of the story is told. And she is married to the tailor on the island. He's quite a bit older than her, and she lives with the tailor and with Ginny, the tailor's sister. And it would be safe to say that they don't really get on very well. So I'll just read this piece. The papers say that the boxes Marconi's men have brought will shoot their words out over the moil like pellets out of a gun, that their speech will land on the other side of the Sound as far as Fairhead itself. Ginny says it's not right to separate a person from their words, to put that much sea between the two. A body could say anything then and feel no responsibility for it. Who's to say, she says, that at that remove, those words belonged to a person at all? How would you know what's the truth when there's a gap the size of the moil between them? A word is a thing to keep close always, she says. Marconi writes in the papers that the new technology will change all our lives for the better. Ginny snorts and says, will it draw the water from the well, or milk the cow, or keep the pig out of the turnips? As if that's all there is to living. As if survival is the best that any of us can hope for. I would like to look into the faces of the strangers. I would like to see the face of a man who has the power to cast his words out across the sea. But I don't want them to see me standing here, curious. So I step under the arch into the big garden, behind the fern and the bucky rose that grow along the wall, and I wait there until the rattle of the cart dies away. For days, Mr. Kemp has met every train from Belfast, and still there's no sign of the mysterious cells. He's in the post office in Ballymoney every turn round, says Dougal, telegramming the stations. No cells, where are the cells? Then finally, the whole lot arrived on the last train at 9 in the evening. Dougal was enlisted to help unload them at the station and row them over to the island. Mr. Kemp presiding over the cargo like it was newborns they were handling and not a load of equipment. What did they look like, says the tailor. Like boxes, says Dougal. Like more boxes. What's to become of us anyway, says Ginny. We'll be overrun with men and boxes, shooting words from one end of the island to the other and back again. The air'll be black with words. It'll get to be that we'll be batting them away like midges on a summer's night. I can't help but smile at the thought of Ginny being chased and bitten by a swarm of words. I doubt if even the fear of that would cure her of her gossiping. I picture the black letters in the air, the L's and the M's and the B's, turning like starlings over the Sound in the evenings, swirling like eddies, all of one mind, rising to roost in the trees. Branches lined with letters like leaves, clusters of them like fruit. What are you smiling at? Ginny says to me. Not a thing, I say.
So when I read that extract for myself, there were a couple of images that stuck out to me. And the first one is that idea of the body being separated from its words by the sea. I loved that. And I think Ginny has a fair point when she says that people could lose all sense of responsibility for themselves. And I think that's something we've probably seen in our whole internet age. The other thing that stuck out to me was Nuala when she was saying she wanted to see these men who had the power to fling out the words across the sea, but she didn't want to be seen herself. And I think it kind of illustrates the two extremes that are happening in our world where some people are speaking all the time without any care for what they're saying, and then there's the other end of the spectrum, which is where I tend to sit, where people feel like they can't enter into discussions at all because it's just so fraught and polarized and difficult at the minute. And that can be harmful too in its own way when you become passive and stop participating. So the next song that I'm going to sing is kind of about that, and it's called Wasting. I've got love inside of me, but it's limited and I'm lazy, and it's wasting away, wasting away, wasting away. Oh, I got love inside of me, but it's limited and I'm lazy, and it's wasting away, wasting away, wasting away. When did it start, the disconnect, the misdirecting? When did it stick, when did it cleave, the sickly sweetening? Oh, I wish I had a reason to be complicated. I just tried my best and made a mess like everybody else, I guess. Oh, I got love inside of me, but it's limited and I'm lazy, and it's wasting away, wasting away, wasting away. When did it stop, the showing up, the making of you? When did it seem oblivion meant nothing to you? Oh, I wish I had a reason to be underrated. I just tried my best not to make a mess. Now they're in love with someone else, I guess. So I got love inside of me, but I don't know where it should go, and you're wasting away, wasting away, wasting away. Oh, I got love inside of me, but I don't know where it should go, and you're wasting away, you're wasting away, you're wasting away, and you're wasting away, you're wasting away, you're wasting away, and you're wasting away, you're wasting away, you're wasting away. Before I turn over, before I turn over, before I turn over, I'll turn to you. Before I turn over, before I turn over, before I turn over, I'll turn to you. I'll turn to you. I'll turn to you. I'll turn to you. So the next song I'm going to play for you is called River. I wrote it when I was living in the US a couple of years ago, and there was literally a sea dividing me and the people that I loved. And again, it sort of is all about those themes of isolation, loneliness, feeling like a passive observer in your own life. But it's also kind of a little bit of a love letter from me to the North Coast. Where I was inland. There was just this river I could go to, but there was nothing like the sea that we have here. And all I wanted to do was just sit myself in front of it, so I knew that would make me feel better. So this next song, I'm going to pop over there and play guitar again, and it's called River. You're awake, so far, so great. Don't look now, you've made the bed. Now you're sat on the edge, repress and refresh. Why not get there with time to spare? You could ask a question that shows that you really care. Copy and paste. You're sorry, but you're tired and it's late. I need the river more than ever. I need the river more than ever. Foaming at the mouth for the Atlantic Sea. It breaks and I breathe. Faster heart rate, stop to hydrate. Just some little ways to snap yourself into shape. And the thoughts that you hate, you're outrunning every step that you take. I need the river more than ever. I need the river more than ever. Foaming at the mouth like the Atlantic Sea. It breaks and I breathe. 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 And you stepped out of sight, kept the pieces of your mind. You don't dissipate. Hold your bones just to feel the weight.
Thanks, Hannah, and thanks again, Bernie, for that really beautiful reading from The Watch House, all about the power of words. And Bernie, both The Watch House and your previous novel, The Butterfly Cabinet, are historical novels. You obviously have a love of history and our local history here on the North Coast. Tell us about that, and are there any particular ethical issues in creating historical fiction about, real people that's connected to particular locations and places, whether that's Rathlin for The Watch House or Portstewart for The Butterfly Cabinet?
Yeah, I think there are, and it's one of the things that I struggled with more with The Butterfly Cabinet, which is a story that's set in Portstewart in 1892, and it's around the story of a family in which a young child died in the house, and the mother of the family was accused and sentenced for her death. And the family were very well known. They were a very well connected family at the time, and there are still people around, even though we're talking over 120 years ago. There are still people around whose maybe parents or aunts and uncles would have known members of the family at a later time in life. So I was very conscious that it was a story that, although people knew the story, that maybe it wouldn't be something that you'd want to have necessarily drawn out into the light again. But there was something about it that just wouldn't let me go. And initially, I thought I was about to write a short story. I was engaged in writing a number of short stories, and I thought this might be the first in a sequence. But I just, the more I read about the incident that happened, and the more I found out about the family and about the period in history, the more intrigued I became. And I was talking to a friend about it at the time, and I remember saying to her, I don't think I can write this story. I think, it's sort of, it's a sensitive story, and I'm not sure that I'm ready to tackle it. And I can remember her saying to me, that's fine, you don't have to write it. But just think about this for a moment. Imagine that you don't write it, and then in 2 or 3 or 4, how many years' time, you walk into a bookshop and you pick up a book and someone else has written the story. How do you feel about that? And I thought, oh no, I'd be gutted if someone else wrote the story. I want to write the story. So there was nothing to prevent anyone from writing it. It was, the information was in the public domain. It's very well documented. I spent hours in the library in Coleraine looking at microfilm of the Coleraine Chronicle in 1892. There's lots and lots of information available, so it wasn't necessarily new, but yeah, there were definitely issues around that I struggled with, and also with the Watch House. Although it's a different kind of story, the question of the engineers coming to the island again is something that's very well documented in itself. And I was really lucky to have access to the diaries of George Kemp. So George Kemp was Marconi's chief engineer, and he usefully kept lots of diaries about what they were up to the whole time that they were working on wireless technology. So I went to the Bodleian and looked at those. George didn't spend a lot of time, on anything other than the experiments. So they weren't juicy reading the diaries, I have to say, but it gave me a really good idea of what they were engaged in, where they were, how long they spent in the day, what the weather conditions were like, things like that. So that was really helpful. But again, I was very conscious in both cases that I was writing fiction, that I was writing a fictionalized version of events that had actually happened, and I think you just have to give yourself the freedom to do that and to allow yourself to invent, because that's what I'm engaged in. I'm not a journalist, I'm not a reporter, I'm not a documentary maker, I'm a fiction writer. So yeah, you just have to allow yourself to do that, and try and be brave about it, which is hard, but that's what you've got to do.
And they're both really, really powerful books. And I know in the Watch House, also again from conversations we've had, I know, and from the book itself, just how important place names are to you, and maps, and all the local names. And there's such a poetry in that book around the names and the place names. And I think when you were writing the book, you had a map close by to you at all times of all the old names for the island, and all the different field names and road names and place names.
I absolutely did. It's still here. You can't see it because it's above the desk, or it's behind the computer. But yes, I have an Ordnance Survey map of Rathlin. And I have to say, I still spend a lot of time at Prony, Public Records Office of Northern Ireland, on their website looking at their maps. You can lose days. I'm fascinated by the place names and by the differences you can see in the maps, because you can kind of reveal different periods of the maps and see how the landscape has changed, how buildings have changed. It's really fascinating, and a great way not to be doing what you should be doing, which is actually writing a story.
Well, maybe it's part of the story as well. Obviously, the East Lighthouse is a really key location for the book, and we're talking about sort of connection and connectivity, and that runs throughout the book. And it's a real strong symbol. A lighthouse is a symbol of both isolation and connection, and I think there's something really important in that. For the time we're currently in as well, there's something very paradoxical about lighthouses shining through the darkness and drawing people in. I'm sure you felt that a lot when you were working on the book.
Yeah, it was one of the symbols actually over lockdown, I think, the lighthouse. Yeah, I mean, who's not drawn to the light? We're all drawn to the light, whether it be artificial light or natural light. And we're coming into the time of year now when the light is getting less, and that can be really hard. But yeah, it is a beacon, the lighthouse, and it obviously has a very practical function. It's there to warn, vessels that they're reaching dangerous waters. So I mean, there's lots and lots to explore in that. And I do remember one of those first visits to Rathlin being on the island and at night. And it's, as you know, one of the darkest places you could be once you go inland from the lights of the harbour. And the first time that I was walking up back to the hostel in the dark by myself, getting scared out of my wits by all the stories that people love to tell you about Rathlin. And I remember walking up the road, and the light from the lighthouse just came around and brushed over me and passed on. It was a lovely feeling, it felt like you had company, that there was actually someone or something there that was, looking out for you, that was leading you, that was, literally, it's there to protect and to help and to support. So, and I've never been in a place before where, where that has happened, where you can see the light so clearly as it brushes across the island. It's just a lovely thing. I'd recommend that everybody go and experience the light from the lighthouse on Rathlin.
And it's very special. And so many of us, I mean, we're really lucky that, the light, we can see the light from our house at night. And I agree with you about walking along the Rathlin roads with the lighthouse flashing and shining and waiting for the lights and counting the time between the lights. It's really special. You're going to read us another extract from the book?
I am. Yes, and this does refer to the light. The lighthouse on Rathlin, the East Lighthouse now, but at the time that Marconi was there, or his engineers were there, it was the only lighthouse, so it was just referred to as the light. And it was the site of the experiments. So what was happening was the engineers were sending wireless signals from there over to the different points on the mainland. So at one point it was the Coast Guard station at Tor Head. At another point it was what was known as the Waymaster's Cottage, and subsequently became known as Marconi's Cottage. And then later on up to the White House, up on the cliff top there. And also the church spire was one of the locations they used as well. But they were always sending from the lighthouse on Rathlin. And this piece is Nuala again. And this comes fairly late in the book, after something very significant has happened. I'm not going to give any spoilers, and I've edited a little bit so that I'm not giving too much away. But she is in her home in the cottage on the island, and she's visited by Dougal. Dougal is the tailor's cousin, but he turns out to be a very good friend to Nuala, a much better friend actually than she realizes. There's no sleep on a night with fog. Up at the light, the 18-pounder goes off every 8 minutes, and the sound runs around the compound and up the walls and rattles the windows and shakes the floors and echoes all the way down to Portavillan and over the sea and beyond. The The smell of cordite hangs in the air, sweet and thick. The puffs of smoke thin and disappear into the fog as the beam from the lighthouse slices the air. I sit on the settle bed in the tailor's house and count the seconds between each pass. 10 in the dark, 50 in the light, the unchanging character of the light. In the morning, the balcony round the tower will be heaped with birds and moths, bewildered by the fog and the lantern. I can almost hear the dull thud of their small bodies as they hit the glass. Mr. Kernahan's boys will go out and gather them into flour bags, wheat ears and starlings, thrushes and robins. They'll sweep the moths up with a besom, a harvesting of small deaths. When darkness thickens the fog to black and shadows creep over the floor, I hear the jingle of Susie's bridle, a step on the threshold, and then Dougal fills the frame of the door. He looks at me, sitting on the settle bed, no lamp lit, the room dim, the fire low in the grate. Ginny's the worse for wear, he says. She'll not make it back the night. I saw that the horse had slipped her moorings. I just called to see you were... And there he stops, as his eyes find the mound and the mess on the floor. He takes a step into the room. What happened, Nilla? Are you all right? I'm grand, I say.
That was lovely, Bernie. Thank you. And it's been really, really nice this evening, listening to your work and talking to you and giving everyone out there just a bit more of a flavour of who you are and where you find your motivations. And I'm sure a lot of people are already familiar with your writing and your books. But if they aren't, I would really recommend both the Watch House and the Butterfly Cabinet. And I know you do a lot of workshops and a lot of mentoring as well. What are you working on at the moment?
Well, I've just finished putting together a short story collection. Actually, I'm not sure it's finished. It probably isn't finished, but it's nearly there. And I am working on a novel. So I'm heading to the Glens of Antrim next, around 1950s maybe. I'm not quite sure what the story is yet, but there's a character who's popped up and who's got a bit to say for herself. So I'm listening and recording and trying to work out what's happened with her. Something's happened, that's for sure. She's not telling me yet what it is, but we'll see.
That's a very exciting time to be at in the writing process. And you said something before to me that has really stayed with me. You described yourself as a slow writer, and I wasn't sure at the time whether you were being maybe a little bit even critical of yourself, but slow writing, this whole way of looking at life now and engaging in life, there's the whole slow movements out there of, and I think actually it's something to celebrate, and we're finding out more and more that we're actually get much more out of our lives and we can connect much more when we slow the pace down and really listen. So I just think it's wonderful that you consider yourself to be a slow writer and that there's a whole world out there of slow writing, and I just think that should be how we approach life much more.
I'm not sure my agent would agree with you, Jessica, but but I like the idea that it's something to be celebrated.
Let's go with that. Celebrated. It's how we can find much more connection in standing back a bit, and maybe this is something we're all learning a bit more from, the COVID times that would never have foreseen 2020 being the way it is. But if it helps us all to be more reflective and to listen more and to learn from people like yourself, that you've been doing this for years, and maybe we all need to take a leaf out of your book, Bernie, and reflect more and listen more.
Okay, that's fine with me.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you to Hannah. We're going to hand back over to Hannah again to play us out this evening. and look forward to hearing her final tunes. Bernie, it's been a real pleasure to talk to you tonight, so thank you very much.
And you, Jessica, thank you so much. And a big thank you to Causeway Coast and Glens and to Decima Connolly for organising the Northern Lights events. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks. And hopefully we'll see each other soon in person.
That's a deal.
So over lockdown, I started a little musical project called Suitcase Songs. Jessica mentioned it earlier, but if you don't know the backstory, I'll fill you in right now. I discovered back in about March or April that my now husband's nanny used to be a singer. She started as kind of a child star entertaining the troops, and then throughout the 40s and 50s she sang in the Ulster Hall. She auditioned for Ted Heath and sang along with Ruby Murray, or at least knew her anyway, and up in the attic of her son's house there was this big brown suitcase filled with all this beautiful sheet music that she used to sing, and it was just languishing there covered in dust. So I thought it'd be a nice idea to record some of the songs and release them once a week on YouTube, especially for people who were maybe shielding or in nursing homes who might remember the songs from the first time around. So it's been lovely for me to do, and I really love the music. So I'm going to play a couple from Nanny June's Suitcase of Tunes. And the first one is How Can You Buy Killarney? An American landed on Erin's green isle. He gazed at Killarney with rapturous smile. How can I buy it? He said to his guide. I'll tell you how. With a smile he replied. How can you buy all the stars in the sky? How can you buy two blue Irish eyes? How can you purchase a fond mother's sighs? How can you buy Killarney? Nature bestowed all her gifts with a smile. The emerald, the shamrock, the blarney. When you can buy all these wonderful things, then you can buy Killarney. Such a wonderful landscape you never have seen. A jewel so rare 'twould befit any queen. Pride of all Erin, a joy to behold. Heaven on earth, far more precious than gold. How can you buy all the stars in the skies? How can you buy two blue Irish eyes? How can you purchase a fond mother's sighs? How can you buy Killarney? Nature bestowed all her gifts with a smile. The emerald, the shamrock, the blarney. When you can buy all these wonderful things, then you can buy Killarney. So yes, that was How Can You Buy Killarney? I'll show you the front of the page. They don't make them like this anymore. And the final song I'm going to sing is my absolute favourite. It is Smile, the melody of which was written by Charlie Chaplin, and it's just really beautiful. But before I do that, I just want to thank again Redeemer for having me here, to Bernie and Jessica for having me along, and to Flowerfield and Roe Valley Arts for making this all happen. It's really been a joy for me anyway. So yeah, seems appropriate to end on this note and song, which is Smile. it's breaking when there are clouds in the sky. You'll get by if you smile through your fear and sorrow. Smile, and maybe tomorrow you'll see the sun come shining through for you. Light up your face with gladness, hide every trace of sadness. Although a tear may be ever so near, that's the time you must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use of crying? You'll find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile. Light up your face with gladness, hide every trace of sadness. Although a tear may be ever so near, that's the time you must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use of crying?